The evidence for evolution is going to be 5 things that support the theories of evolution. The first thing that supports this theory is the fossil record. Now, the fossil record shows how the biodiversity, the variety of life on Earth, what it is, and it also shows where the mass extinctions happen, and these are things that are preserved within the rock. Fossils are the preserved remains of once living organisms, so things that like dinosaur bones or woolly mammoth carcasses or bugs trapped in amber are going to be fossils. This is an ancient trilobite fossil that has been preserved as what we would perceive as rock. Fossils are created by being buried in sediment, and that will harden around it and create an imprint of the organism. The calcium in the bone or other hard tissue mineralizes. It gets really, really hard. The surrounding sediment hardens to form rock, and this is what happens. And we have a fossil of the organism. All the soft tissue goes away, and we get an imprint of their bones. These are some of the fossils that we have. We have bugs in amber, we have leaf imprints, we have skulls, we have petrified wood, dinosaur bones, shells from ancient snails and nautiluses, and all sorts of things that we can have fossilized. We date the fossils by figuring out how old they are. The oldest rocks are in the lowest layers, the newest rocks are in the highest layers. And we use relative dating by finding the position of the fossil in the ground. We also use the law of superposition. The age of the fossil is determined by how far down in the ground it is. So the further down, the older it is. The higher it up it is, the less age it has. So we look at the layers of the rock, and here you can see some nice layers of rock. We also use absolute dating, which is by measuring the radioactive decay of carbon-14 within the fossils, or uranium-238. The half-life is the amount of time it takes for half of an isotope to decay, and over time you get the amount of the isotope goes down. So over time, your oldest fossils will have smaller organisms, bacterians, and as we go up the evolutionary scale, we get dinosaurs and bugs and unicellular things, vertebrates, plants, and you can see where things started coming off of our evolutionary tree. Geographic distribution is the second thing that helps us understand evolution. Geographic distribution shows the similarities among species living on different continents. So how are things that are on Africa similar to things that are here on North America? So Charles Darwin, saw that islands are missing plants and animals that are found on nearby continents, so there wasn't everything everywhere. He also saw that the plants and animals found on the islands are similar but not the same, and the more closely related to species on the island. And species can only get to the islands if they fly, float, or swim. And often species change once they have reached an island. So he traveled to the Galapagos and found all of these things. The third thing that we see as evidence for evolution is structural similarities. Homologous structures are structures that appear different and have different functions but came from a common ancestor. Homologous structures would be like the 4 limbs in these different animals. The whale flipper, the frog leg, the horse leg, lion legs, human legs, bat wings, and bird's wings all have similar structures. They appear different, but they have similar structures, but they came from a common ancestor because all of these bones have the same function. We also have vestigial structures. They have no apparent function, but resemble structures that their ancestors possessed. A good example would be the pelvis and femur in a whale. They still have them, but they have no purpose. Another example would be the appendix in humans, muscles for wiggling ears. The boa constrictor has the hip and pelvis bones and rudimentary hind legs. Manatees have fingernails on their fins. I mean, there are several things that blind cavefish have non-functional eyes. They're there, but they have no use. And the other one would be our coccyx bone. We have no use for a tail, or the blind cavefish. Divergent evolution shows how homologues and vestigial structures, how they are related to divergent evolution. Divergent evolution suggests that there was a common ancestor that all of these different animals or organisms derived from. They diverged from this common ancestor. So divergent evolution says there was one common one and everything else came from it because of these homologous and vestigial structures. Analogous structures are structures with the same function but not the same structure, and they are not from a common ancestor. So the insect wing and a bird wing and a bat wing all have structures that are analogous, the wing type. They did not derive from the same thing, and they did not come from the common ancestor. They all have the same purpose, but not from the common ancestor. Analogous structures are going to suggest convergent evolution. There is no common ancestor, but they will survive in similar situations and similar environments. So the flippers and the fins on sharks, penguins, and dolphins. Similar structure, similar purpose, not from the same ancestor. There are also similarities in early development. Embryology is the study of early development. So in most animals and most organisms, the same cells or the same group of embryonic cells will develop in the same order in similar patterns in all types of life. So there was a scientist who said that this was recapitulating evolution recapitulating your development. So the fish, the rabbit, and the gorilla babies in this picture all look very similar at the early stages of life, but the further they come down in development, the more like what they're supposed to be they look like. Molecular similarities. All organisms have very similar molecular structure. DNA has the same 4 nitrogenous bases. RNA has the same 64 mRNA codons that code for the same amino acids. And the more closely related the DNA sequences are to each other, the more closely related the organisms are to one another. We also have dichotomous keys and cladograms. These cladograms show how things changed over time and where certain characteristics started to evolve and appear within these organisms. So on the lower one, you have the hagfish. Hagfish are jawless fish. They don't have any jaws. So later on down the line, jaws started to become prevalent, and then you have your perch. Then we have things that are venturing out of the water and onto land. They develop lungs. Then they develop claws and nails, and then they develop feathers or fur. So there are things that happen on the evolutionary tree that makes these things different from one another. That's it for this show, and I hope this was helpful.